there's just in general been a loss of instructional time for students. And WestEd put out a report, Science Learning During COVID-19 and Beyond, and that documented how severely, in particular, science instruction, and I think presumably environmental literacy instruction goes with science instruction. So, and there's been a major decrease in the amount of instructional time that teachers are spending on science and environmental literacy because of COVID. Disciplines like English language arts and math seem to be prioritized. And so, with even less instructional time than before, science and environmental literacy have been impacted greatly because of COVID. Oftentimes, environmental literacy is addressed by taking kids outside. Maybe there's a day field trip that teachers take students on. Maybe they go into their schoolyard to do an activity. Maybe they do a residential science camp where they spend several days and nights at experiencing an ecosystem at some wonderful kind of science camp offering. And as you know, a lot of those opportunities are closed off to our students during COVID. And I think all of that, in addition, is impacting the environmental literacy opportunities. So just the lack of offerings and the fact that teachers really can't, they're not able to use the same kind of lessons that they have already spent time developing. So this shift in their mode of instruction makes it difficult, and they have to kind of learn some new tricks and start figuring out how can we do environmental literacy now that I may not have students face to face every day. Maybe I'm in a hybrid setting, maybe I'm in a full distance learning setting. I'm not sure exactly what's happening in every county office. I can kind of speak specifically to San Joaquin County. One way that we had to pivot is our residential science camp, which traditionally we offered to students in grades 5 and 6, was closed down due to COVID, right? So we pivoted and created a virtual outdoor education program. And we managed to serve over 200 classrooms this school year. So with this program, and we're really trying to serve as many students that would normally go to science camp with a virtual outdoor ed program. And so we literally went to we had Allison Collins, who is the principal at our Jones Gulf Science Camp. She went out and she would take recordings of like a nature walk or of the pond with the algae on it, and scoop some water and collect a sample of water from the pond, and kind of use a magnifying glass to look at that. And in other words, bring the outdoor setting onto Zoom, onto the virtual platform, and try to provide students with the experience, since we know it's near impossible to give them that kind of in the preferred setting, which is really just taking kids outside is really where we want to be. But at least this is a substitution that is comparable. One technique is to use a hyperdoc. And a hyperdoc allows a teacher to keep students on like this interactive, digital document where they can do synchronous and asynchronous learning with this document. So, normally a teacher is maybe giving a presentation, and then the students go home and the presentation stays in the classroom, and the students kind of go home and do some sort of work or just meet the next day. But now this slide deck kind of travels with the student, and there's slides specifically for them to interact with whatever they're learning about. So one thing we realized right away is we wanted to share these types of digital learning tools with our community-based partner network. So we have a SPEL network, CPEL, which is Community Partners for Environmental Literacy, and we provided trainings on distance learning tools to help build capacity for them to continue to be able to do their educational outreach in our region, but in a distance learning forward kind of way. Another technology that we train them on is Flipgrid and video capturing. So being able to kind of pre-record some teaching, some instruction, some maybe showing students something, a phenomenon that they want to kind of engage students with. Now they have the skills to be able to record those and then maybe upload them to Flipgrid and then have students asynchronously interact with this app. So, it's just about being innovative and creative and figuring out how can we still engage students, even though we can't be with them face to face sometimes. Our science framework is based off of these pillars that I think we still have to consider even in a distance learning when we try to teach science in distance learning. Kind of this phenomenon-based instruction, like starting with something very engaging that gets students to wonder and ask questions and notice things. And every student can ask questions and every student can wonder in their own way and come in and kind of access their prior knowledge and share. And so, I think we need to, in many ways, just go back to the basics, have students in breakout rooms, having discussions, giving them something to talk about. The teacher can monitor those, those breakout rooms and move from room to room and then bring everyone back together in a whole class discussion. So kind of utilizing the virtual learning tools that are on our platforms. And then we use Jamboard quite a bit. Jamboard is a whiteboard space that students can jump on and put Post-its and draw. And so we ask them to write their questions. So that once you show a phenomenon, it's like, okay, well, what questions do you have, And they can do that digitally. And it's very similar to what you would do in a classroom if you were face-to-face with them. And you could hand out Post-its physically, or you can do it digitally with Jamboard. So that's been a great tool. And I think, this inquiry model we still need to stick with. Okay, which is basically constructing knowledge through, this process of exploring something and then explaining something and then, evaluating and elaborating. I think kind of just thinking about how we can shift to what you would normally do face to face, but you have to kind of think in this asynchronous way now, because some of the instructional time is no longer face to face. So we have to provide students with some of that exploration and that inquiry, but in an asynchronous way. And the hyperdocs can help with that. And the Jamboards can help with that. And we can still have discussions in our breakouts. So in many ways, you can do a lot of what you could normally do in a traditional face-to-face classroom through distance learning. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think students are, Zoom fatigued, just like adults are Zoom fatigued, there's just less of that social interaction that they would normally have to kind of decompress in between a class and the next class, and so it's kind of like we all know it's like Zoom after Zoom after Zoom after Zoom gets very exhausting and tiring. So I think it's been very difficult for our students. I think they feel isolated and disconnected from their peers. And so I think it is really important to bring in a social element to our teaching and still connect with our students through and meet their social emotional learning needs, because those are probably the areas where they're struggling the most. It's not so much the content. And a teacher is always thinking content first, but in this strange time that we're living in, it's really important to connect with students as humans and just find out what they're going through, give them a chance to talk to each other and their peers about that, and and weave in the content. But until we meet their social emotional needs, it's really difficult to learn the content anyway. Yeah, students are now based at home versus based in the classroom. And so, from an environmental literacy kind of context standpoint, we need to utilize the space from where our students live, their local parks, their backyard, their neighborhood. There's a lot going on in the ecosystems right there where they live in residential areas, and so that's kind of nice because it kind of brings the focus away from the school, which is that's a great context too. But it's a new opportunity to explore the local ecosystem, and a great vehicle for that is nature journaling, and that's something that we've incorporated in our virtual outdoor ed program quite a bit. And that's literally having them. So in other words, it doesn't have to be a virtual plant or a virtual tree. They can go out to their park and kind of draw and think about and with nature journaling, you're doing a lot. You're asking questions. You're interacting with with the phenomenon that's in front of you. And people, I think it's a time for students to kind of slow down and stop and really look at something and observe closely and deeply. And we walk by this natural, the nature that's all around us all the time without really kind of stopping to take a look at it. And so I think there's an opportunity here to really understand nature, right where we live. Well, I hope I hope we can come back to something more traditional sooner than later. But I do think we're in at least a hybrid model, for some time until students maybe get vaccinated and things kind of loosen up like that. So, I think that first of all, lots of community partners and the state parks, for example, have created this great online resource for teachers. So there's a whole brand new set of resources that students can access from home. And when we do go back to face, we can't forget about these amazing resources, and we should be utilizing them during this transition time. And I think transitioning to being in this distance learning mode has given teachers time to learn new tricks and to basically create hyperdocs, which can be used in a face-to-face setting, so that we're sending students home, on the continued path for their homework, let's say, and then coming back for discussion the next day. It's kind of like the flipped classroom. If students are doing something that, if they're trying to read something or learn about something, and then they come back ready to discuss the next day, well, teachers are more equipped now to kind of engage with that style of learning, which can bring discussions, because I think there's so much learning that happens when students talk and when students share with each other. And so we need time in the classroom for that, not just direct instruction, right? And so these new tools have provided teachers with additional skills to teach differently. And I think that's only going to benefit us overall. In the last year, and maybe even a little bit beyond, SJCOE has really been focused on establishing and sustaining environmental literacy networks, where we're trying to bring teachers together, community partners together, youth and students together, and basically share with each other and help build capacity with each other to address kind of learning in this new way. So that's part of kind of what we've been working on. We have a partnership with California Department of Education, where we are kind of taking the California Green Ribbon Schools program and we are holding 4 workshops to raise awareness of this great program. We see this program as a vehicle to really look at sustainability for a school, to look at the health and wellness of students and staff, and to look at what environmental education activities and learning do you have going on. And these can be distance learning or face-to-face, you know? So yeah, so basically because we meet through Zoom, right? So what's happened is all of these networks meet virtually. And that has allowed us to expand these environmental literacy networks to Region 6 to include the 5 counties of Amador, Calaveras, San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne. And so now students from the greater region can come together in our Youth for Environmental Literacy Network and share, you know, these are passionate young champions that are doing great works in their schools and communities, but they don't often get to talk about that to other students that are similar to them from the greater region. And the same thing with our TEL network. These are teachers that have been waiting for this moment to have this emphasis be on environmental education and environmental literacy. And now they get to come together and share with each other just their lessons, their resources, their new tricks with distance learning. And the same thing for our SPELL network, which is Community Partners for Environmental Literacy. We have community partners, and some of our foothill counties, Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne, they have a great array of community partners that we want to bring and have the benefit of here in San Joaquin County and in Stanislaus as well. So these networks, because we meet virtually, they're allowing kind of a cross-pollination to happen too, where teachers, because we'll bring the TEL network over to the YEL network, and we'll bring the SPELL network over to the TEL network. So now community partners are talking to teachers, and the youth are telling the teachers how important this is to them, and the teachers are getting inspired. So yeah, this approach to develop environmental literacy networks for those stakeholders is starting to pay off now, and we're really seeing a lot of excitement and momentum with these environmental literacy networks. Yeah, in terms of where we're at with environmental literacy and where we're going, honestly, I think we're at the beginning of environmental literacy. We have so much work to do still, but recognizing that is the first step, and then engaging your stakeholders in a process that is sustainable, that's going to be able to continue, is really important, because this work is critical with the climate crisis that we face, and environmental challenges like air quality locally for us. You know, our communities are suffering from these effects, and they deserve to know about it, and they deserve to have the skills and tools to work towards change. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, we're at the beginning, but we have to start somewhere. And I think we've gotten started now in San Joaquin County. And I think a lot of counties are seeing how important this work is and have begun their work. Others have already been working in this space for a while. But I think we'll continue to see this environmental literacy kind of rise in importance and priority for county offices across California. And we'll just keep doing the good work and educating our communities.